this part of the video, I'll talk to you about the different types of data that you might encounter in the wild. As I mentioned before, we'll be focusing in this guide on quantitative data, so I'll cover some of the quantitative data that you can encounter. First, an important point to note is the difference between a source and a data source. So if you're linking in your work to an article that you use, that could be a source, but it's not a data source. So when we talk about data sources, we really talk about a data set. For quantitative data, that could mean a collection of data points, really a file or a set of files that have data points in them. And for qualitative data, this could mean, for instance, a set of pictures. Could be data that you've collected yourself, but yeah. So that's really what we're talking about when we talk about a data source. So some of the data sources that you might encounter are data in visualizations, for instance, in articles, papers, or books. So that could be like a graph that you find in an article that is showing you the trend of something. So the graph itself is not really the data. So if you can, you should always try to find the data behind that graph if you want to use that and find your own, get your own results from that data. You might also find data in an interactive visualization. The great part about that is that you can play with the data yourself, and you can sometimes even do all your data exploration within that visualization. So that could be really cool. Example of that is this live corona tracker map that has been used a lot in the previous months. It'll need a second to load. And here I can explore the data myself. I can look into how different countries have been affected by corona. So here I can really do my exploration within the visualization. But it also mentions the actual data that is behind it. So here in the data sources, I can actually find a list of downloadable data sources. So if I want to do more things that are not possible with this interactive visualization, then I can download the data and work with it myself. So that will be data in an interactive visualization. Of course, there's also raw data. So when I talk about raw data here, what I mean is that you actually have the file. So in this live corona tracker map, I can download data, and that would be the actual raw data. So with that, you have the benefit that you have all the freedom to explore and analyze the data. So you have a lot more control over it. You can also find if there are any missing values or maybe even some errors in the data. So yeah, in this guide, we'll work with raw data. Then there's also a special kind of data called metadata. And this data basically describes something else. So this could be, for instance, the file type of a data set, or the number of entries in the data set, or the description of the data set, which people are covered in the data set, their average age. So metadata is very important because without it, you basically just have numbers or values, and there's no real way to interpret them. So even the name of a column in your data set basically is metadata. It's a description of the actual data. So metadata is very important. And then, of course, there's also data gathered by you or self-collected data. As in this CCDL project, you'll be gathering data yourself. So I've written down some tips here about how to work with self-collected data. So yeah, those are basically the kinds of data that you might encounter. And the rest of the guide focuses on raw data. Thanks.